Hello, Professor McTammany. My name is Ariana Banks, and I'm here to tell you all about the qualities of an effective teacher. At the beginning of the year, when I didn't know anything yet, I thought that the key to being an effective teacher was to have a really good relationship with your students so that you could encourage them and build them up and really just believe in them. And that's why, for my effective teaching baseline, I wrote a short story in which a young girl has a great teacher who encourages her to do her best and kind of come out of her shell a little bit. After taking Education 1020 and learning about what an effective teacher looks like, I still think that relationships are really important. However, I also recognize now that there are a lot more qualities that a teacher needs to have in order to teach their students to the best of their ability. On the second day of class, we made a list of all the characteristics that we thought a good teacher needed to have. After that, a lot of the things that we read and discussed gave us evidence of why those are important qualities to have. For example, James S. Coleman tells us that there are 3 purposes of education: to prepare kids for the workforce, to create educated citizens who know how to function in a democratic society, and to simply make kids better people. Since teachers are responsible for educating students, it's important for them to be able to teach in such a way that allows for all 3 purposes of education to be met. Coleman touches on this when he talks about the 5 principles of measuring whether schools are equitable: tangible community inputs, racial composition, intangible community inputs, outcomes of students from equal backgrounds, and outcomes of students from unequal backgrounds. As I wrote about in my school visit reflection, I think that the intangible community inputs are the most important and kind of encompass all of those. As Coleman says, these intangibles are such things as teacher morale, teachers' expectations of students, level of interest in the student body and learning, or others. Any of these factors may affect the impact of the school on a given student within it. So, a teacher's relationship with their student and being caring and compassionate would fit into that category. As I observed at Hume Fogg, the students' relationships with their teachers seemed really good, which seemed to make the school have an overall better environment than Stratford. This topic also came up in the reading of Possible Lives, in which it touched on a lot of different schools and environments where kids did better or liked it better or learned more when the environment was better due to teachers' relationship with students and just being compassionate towards them. All of this evidence truly shows how important a teacher-student relationship is to the classroom. Now that I know this from the readings, I wanted to see if it applied to real life. To answer this question, I interviewed a teacher, some parents, and some students to get their thoughts on the qualities of an effective teacher. As a former teacher, what were some of the most important qualities you had to have to be an effective teacher?
Oh, I would say being real, being flexible, being able to focus and multitask, which are kind of opposites, and being able to make the content relevant to students' lives.
And of those qualities, what do you think is the most important?
The relevant stuff is it's critical, because if they don't find your content or the way you teach to be relevant to their lives, they'll tune you out.
And does that also help you with building relationships with your students? Is that a big part of it?
Absolutely.
And what was hard about doing all that?
Well, when you do build relationships with students, it can be really tough, because you know the hard situations that kids come from, and the backgrounds and the difficulties and the challenges that some of them are trying to overcome. One of my former students was a valedictorian, but he didn't have papers. He was undocumented, and he was able to go to college, and our whole school was writing letters trying to keep him and his family from facing immigration officials. But after he graduated with a 4.0 from TCU, he decided to move back to Guatemala, where he hadn't been since he was 18 months old. So you see situations like that and you feel like there's not anything you can do, and it's really frustrating to see the best and brightest, you know, do everything by the book and yet, you know, are punished for things beyond their control.
What qualities do you want to see in your children's teachers to know that they're going to be effective?
Well, for my kids in particular, I think they need somebody that's nurturing, and not in a like, oh, I love you kind of way, but just somebody that's going to take into account their needs and their sentiments more than anything.
Do any of your children's teachers stand out in your mind as being particularly good, and why do they stand out?
There are two teachers that I can think of that are really good. My daughter's first grade teacher and my son's as well, because they were very active and engaging with the kids. They would teach them in different ways, like singing a song for multiplication lessons. And then the other teacher is one that my daughter has right now for fifth grade. She's wonderful because she, how do I describe it? She gets on their level. You know, she talks to them at their level, and she really expects a lot from them, and she's very loving, and but also she's not very, you know, strict like a disciplinarian. She's very flexible and easygoing, and doesn't like, you know, get real picky about things and say, "I'll be quiet," or, you know, "Stay in your seat," or, you know, she's not very rigid.
What qualities do you look for or want to see in your children's teachers to know that they're going to be effective?
I think the qualities that you look for in a teacher are compassion and caring. I mean, we know they have qualifications. Clearly, you have to have qualifications to be a teacher. But on top of that, if the kids know that they care, the kids are more responsive to that teacher.
Do any of your children's teachers stand out in your mind as being particularly good, and why do they stand out?
Yes, several of them do stand out, of the ones that our kids have had. And they stand out because they really have done a lot of what you would consider to be over the top or extra stuff for the kids in terms of not just, you know, academics, but also socially, and helping the kids understand relationships and just to be better people.
What do you think that teachers specifically can improve upon to give your children a better education?
I think the temptation is to solely focus on teaching to us some sort of a standardized test. We get that from state to state. We certainly have it in our state. And what I want teachers to focus on is not just the standardized test, but to make sure that children learn the classic things that they need to know from an educational standpoint, you know, aside from the standardized tests.
Do any of your children's teachers stand out as being particularly good, and why do they stand out?
One of them especially. I can remember Andy's fourth grade teacher was Mrs. Burgess, and she was really good about having different types of styles of teaching things. Kinetic was some of them. You know, it wasn't always just up at the board writing, you know, stuff down. Mm-hmm. She had a lot of hands-on stuff, and it seemed to keep all of her class engaged.
Do you think that your children got the education they needed to be successful in the real world?
Yes, I do.
And why or why?
I think that they had teachers that were very caring. I think that they had teachers that wanted to see the students succeed. And I think they were very, very, really dedicated to the job, even though it's, you know, sometimes it's a hard job and the pay is not that great. They really wanted to see the kids.
Who was your favorite teacher so far, and why were they your favorite?
It was probably my kindergarten teacher, Miss Hosty, because she was really nice to me, and I learned a lot from her.
What did you learn that you thought was like really helpful?
Well, that was actually when I started chapter books. I started reading Junie B. Jones books at the end of kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of fun. And I'm so glad I could read that well, because otherwise I wouldn't be reading as well today
Do you think that having a good teacher, like when you had a really good kindergarten teacher, did that make you want to come to school?
Yeah, I felt more comfortable because in pre-K I was just like, I was shy through the whole year, and then once I got to kindergarten, I finally got the hang of it.
So your teacher helped you get adjusted to school?
Yeah.
And come out of your shell a little bit and be less shy?
Yeah.
Who was your favorite teacher so far and why?
I think my favorite teacher would have to be my 6th grade math and science teacher. I liked him because he educated us on math and stuff in a fun way.
And was he also nice and like you had
Yeah, he was nice. He was pretty easy to relate to since he liked biking and stuff, and I liked biking and stuff, and it was cool.
Nice. And did he ever like talk to you guys about his life?
Yeah, he did actually. Yeah.
And what did you think about that?
I thought that was pretty cool because I hadn't met a whole lot of teachers that actually like talking about themselves much, just about what they were teaching.
And how does that like change your opinion of the teacher or like give you more insight into their life? How does that affect?
I think it makes it easier to relate to them, and also so that you can kind of I don't know, form a more substantial opinion about them. Or I like them, not just because I like what they're teaching, but other stuff.
You like them as a person?
Yeah. Makes them, I guess, more like friends than teachers.
After having done all these interviews, it's clear that teachers' relationships with their student are extremely important. As we heard from Paloma and Benjamin, it was very important to them that their teacher was nice to them and seemed to really care about them. And the same thing goes for the parents, too. They wanted to know that the teacher would be compassionate and nurturing and really care about their child's needs. And as Angie said, that the most important quality that she thought teachers needed to have was to make content relevant to her students, which really goes along with relationships because if you as a teacher don't have a relationship with your students and don't know where they're coming from, you can't possibly know how to make the content relevant to their lives. Angie also pointed out a key difficulty that she faced, feeling powerless when one of her students struggled with issues beyond his control. And Susan pointed out that it is a hard job and that teachers don't get much pay to compensate for it. David also talked about how the best teachers for his kids did things that went above and beyond, which is really great, but also requires a lot more work and a lot more time that teachers aren't paid for. I think I've known that being a teacher isn't always going to be an easy job, but it just recently hit me how difficult it's going to be a teacher. This semester I volunteered at TAP, the after-school program, where I tutored a 6-year-old boy named Gary. He's a really sweet kid, but at his age he just can't sit still and focus on one thing for longer than about 5 to 10 minutes. And this was just a major problem since TAP is not set up to let kids have the freedom to run around wildly while others are working. And so I had the difficult task of trying to get Gary to pay attention and do his work. And it was really hard not to lose my patience because he just wouldn't listen to anything that I was saying. And when I was faced with that situation, it was really hard for me to be compassionate and caring towards him because I was just so frustrated that he wouldn't listen to me. One of the teachers in the teacher panel said that she had struggled with a similar issue in her classroom, that since she looked so young, she had to work a long time to get the kids to actually respect her as a teacher. But I think that also goes back to relationships because if you have the kind of relationship with your students that lets them know that you care about them and believe in them and are encouraging them to do their best, then that means that you respect them. And if you respect them, then they are much more likely to respect you and listen to you. That being said, teaching is still an incredibly difficult profession, but one that is also incredibly rewarding. Benjamin said it really well. Relationships with students make teachers seem more like friends. What better way to have an influence on a kid's life than being their friend?